Good evening, everyone. We will start the session today. Before we start the session, I would like to introduce our lovely guests, speakers today, Mr. Ashok Patel. Mr. Ashok Patel is the past president of FGI in the year 2007 and 9, and also the chairperson of FGI Economic Development and International Affairs Committee. He is a chemical engineering graduate from California State Polytechnic University and holds a Master's of Science Chemical Engineering degree from University of South California. Mr. Patel also holds an MBA degree from Claremont Graduate University, USA. Mr. Patel has more than 34 years of rich experience and is the managing director of Simalin Chemicals Industries Private Limited, a manufacturer of high-quality chemical products in Baroda. We also have Professor Amit Dholakia. He is a professor of political science at Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. Earlier, he has held positions of Provost of the GSFC University, Vadodara, and Registrar of Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. He has published 2 books and several research papers in professional journals, apart from numerous articles in newspapers and digital media. Professor Dholakia has also been invited to participate in international academic programs at the University of Michigan, US, Theodor Heuss Academy, Germany, and Regional Center for Strategic Studies, Sri Lanka. We have a pleasure to invite you. May I also request Mr. Abhishek Gangwal, President FGI, to deliver the welcome remarks, please.
Thank you, Premal. Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to yet another FGI discussion as a part of our geopolitical series. Today, the discussion is on the current debt and economic situation of Sri Lanka and Pakistan and its implications for India. I welcome our esteemed speakers, Mr. Ashok Patel, past President FGI and Chairperson FGI Economic Development and International Affairs Committee, Professor Amit Dholakia, Professor of Political Science and former Provost, GSFC University and former Registrar, the MS University of Baroda. My executive and managing committee colleagues, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Federation of Gujarat Industries and all of us here, I am very happy to extend a warm welcome to our guest speakers who will be sharing their views during today's discussion on the current debt and economic situation of Sri Lanka and Pakistan and its implications for India. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to a special guest straight from Sri Lanka, Mr. Arvind Dullu, who's the regional business head for India's leading water and wastewater multinational VA Tech Wabag, Sri Lanka. He has over 22 years of extensive exposure in the water and wastewater sector, and he has been in Sri Lanka for close to 9 years now. In Sri Lanka, his company has executed projects through the Exim Bank of India's buyer's credit arrangement. Until date, they have executed projects close to 200 million USD in the drinking water supply sector. Mr. Dullu works closely with the government of Sri Lanka, as all these are government infrastructure projects, and he has been an observer of the Sri Lankan economic situation over these years. I once again welcome Mr. Dullu, and we look forward to your inputs during the session. I also welcome all the participants in today's webinar. As we all are aware that COVID scenario has all but halted movement across the world and dominated global headlines. While attempts to return to normalcy are progressing in developed countries, still developing countries are a long way from discussions of complete pandemic recovery and future development with the democratically fragile countries such as Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Sri Lanka's debt profile reveals its economy, which is a grim picture that promoted global ratings agencies to downgrade Sri Lanka's sovereign ratings. Moreover, Pakistan's economy also struggles under the combined burden of external and domestic debt. To understand more on the current debt and economic situation of both these countries and its implications to India, we are fortunate to have with us our esteemed speakers who will enlighten us on the subject, and I'm sure that the participants will greatly benefit from the discussion today. I'll just say a few lines about FGI. FGI, or the Federation of Gujarat Industries, was founded in the year 1918 in the erstwhile Baroda state under the progressive rule of Shriman Sayajirao Gaikwad III, and is an apex industries association and a recognized chamber of commerce in Gujarat, having an illustrious track record of 104 years in the service of trade and industry. FGI's success over the years is the result of the commendable support of my colleagues in the managing committee, the esteemed FGI members, consultants, and the efficient FGI secretariat. Before I conclude, I would like to reaffirm FGI's commitment to steer the growth of its member industries, and we shall continue working closely with the government for due implementation of policies and initiatives. Uh, During the webinar, we'll have Mr. Ashok Patel give us a short presentation regarding today's topic. Obviously, Mr. Dholakia will give the expert opinion on the same. Mr. Dullu will give his inputs from Sri Lanka, and then we'll have the forum open for a good, healthy discussion. With these few words, I conclude and invite our speakers to take over the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Mr. Dave, for the very kind introduction which you just made. We're looking forward to a very knowledgeable and exciting session here. I can get right into the meat of the discussion. So may I request Mr. Dave to please present the slides. Okay. I'm going to give you all a brief start on this to define the three countries and some salient statistics, which puts a lot of things in perspective in terms of what we're going to discuss today. As you can see, the first line, it's the population of these three countries. I think this is known to all. The PPP ranking, we, India, are at the 3rd position in terms of PPP. Pakistan is 20th in the world, and Sri Lanka is 88th. The GDPs. So India has reached a nominal GDP of 3.25 trillion, will reach in the year 22 now. And that translates into a PPP of 11.35 trillion, which PPP means the ability for us to purchase and buy products. So US has a ratio of 1. And if you take this ratio, 11.35 divided by 3.25, you're looking at approximately a factor of 3. So the more developed a country is, the PPP ratio is closer to 1, and the less developed a country is, and goods available not as expensive as they are in the West, the ratios are higher. So interestingly, Pakistan has a PPP GDP of 1.2 trillion against our 11.35, and Sri Lanka has a PPP of 307 billion. So you can imagine the size of Sri Lanka. It's really one of the smaller countries in the world. Let's go to the per capita. India is at 2313 and the PPP is 8079. So against US's $60,000 per capita, India, in terms of purchasing power, is at $88,000 or so. That way, Pakistan is around $6,000, and Sri Lanka, with the smaller population base and with whatever GDP they have, it comes out to around 13,900. So that per capita, we can sense that their well-being is a little bit better off than the other two countries. Let's just look at the dollar exchange rate here. India, we are right now at 75. In 2011, we were at 45. So we have a 40% decline as of today. If you go to Pakistan, they're at 176 today, and they were at 85 in 11. So they've got a 52% decline. Sri Lanka, even after the devaluation which happened, they're at 202 today, and they used to be 108 in 2011. So this also is giving an interesting sense of their economy. Below poverty line, what percentage of the population is below poverty line? And below poverty line is defined as $3.5 per day in terms of income. So in rupees, we're looking at 3.5 times 75, say around 300 rupees or so. 6.7% of the population is below that. So if someone is at $4, which isn't good at all, and if someone is at $5, that's no good either. But below 3.5, we've got 6.7%. While in Pakistan, this is a serious issue. They've got 35.7% of the population below $3.50. Sri Lanka, they're at 11.3%, below $3.50. The next line is expressing the external debt of the country in terms of USD. So we owe people $570 billion, which is 42% of the GDP. And Pakistan owes 127 and Sri Lanka 52. So that percentage of GDP is also an important factor. Then comes the public debt. Public debt is 48% for India, 77 for Pakistan, and 101. So that's the internal debt. When you do your annual budget and whatever you cannot meet up, that figure goes into this figure. The foreign reserves, we all know, we have about $600 billion in reserve. Pakistan has got 24. And you won't believe Sri Lanka has 3.1 billion, and it was 2 months ago, this was 1.5 billion, and Chinese just gave them about 1.5 billion against something. So that 1.5 billion has become 3.1 billion. Okay, so take you on to the next slide. Okay, so here, this gives you a perspective of national debt vis-a-vis the developed world. And we have another slide of our neighbors. So if you look at the developing world, you'll spot some crazy figure in terms of the national debt GDP ratio. And you have Japan with 237%. And how they continue to manage that figure is worse than Greece and Italy. Maybe that makes another great session to understand how does a country operate on a 237% national debt ratio. If you look at the US, they used to be 80, but with all this recent money expenditure that they did of almost $11 trillion, they've gone from 80% to 106%. The next, Italy, like we said, Greece, and then comes Italy and Portugal, who are in trouble. We're at 70%, so reasonably comfortable that way, and if we maintain it, then we can carry on like this, in a little better way. France has got a huge public sector, so France is also not, it's edging towards Italy and Portugal. So I think everyone understood this story in terms of development and what their debt is. We'll go to the next slide, please. So this is our neighborhood. We're looking at India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. We had some numbers in the other slide. This includes some other factors in there, but this is the real ultimate debt of our neighbors. China is little, I think this data is a little older data. China is not 55; they're more than that. But if you go here, I think Singapore, you're seeing that Singapore is highest in our area. They do have a lot of borrowings, and we have heard about Bhutan having good external debt. So with this background, the next conversation which is going to come up from Amit Bhai, I'm really looking forward to hearing him speak. We can go there. I can just maybe perhaps bring 1 or 2 points out regarding Sri Lanka, and then I have a very interesting 4-minute thing on Pakistan's military industrial complex, which I would like to speak after Amit Bhai has finished his presentation. Sri Lanka, really what impacted them recently in the last 2 years was the COVID thing, because that country is really relying on the tourism industry. And when that gave way because of COVID, that really hurt them. It is such a big, important part of their economy. The other interesting thing that had happened there is the government of Sri Lanka decided that they will stop using fertilizers completely in their agriculture. So they had this notion that they need to do this. So they went fully to organic farming. And in organic farming, they lost yields and therefore exports and cost of the food went up. And then the exchange rate issue happened where they lost 20% in the last 18 months. And that has caused them to increase the cost of fertilizers like the urea and all that, which India is king in production of fertilizers, urea and other downstream products. So that one thing has really impacted and hurt Sri Lanka. The other aspect, of course, the foreign currency debt, as we talked about, they're really selling out to China. And I understand that, where Colombo is located, they're doubling the size of Colombo by bringing land up from the sea, like they've done in so many. China has done it everywhere. Hong Kong's airport is built on reclaimed land. So that is going. I personally have seen that, and that's going on in Colombo right now. And that 2 square, I think if I have my figure correctly, maybe Mr. Dulu can shed some light on this. That 2 square kilometer, they say 2 by 2, I think it's 4 square kilometer. That's supposed to change things for Sri Lanka, and I don't know how deeply, but hopefully Mr. Dulu can cast some thoughts on that. So having said this, I hope I've lended some clarification to our conversation here, and I look forward to a few minutes after Amit Bhai has spoken. So now I'm happy to hand over to Amit Bhai. Amit Bhai.
Thank you, Ashok Bhai. It's always a pleasure to speak from the platform of FGI. I thank Shri Abhishek Gangwalji, President, Federation of Gujarat Industries, Premal Bhai, and of course, my dear friend Ashok Bhai, for inviting me to share my views on this very important geo-economic crisis that is developing in India's neighborhood. Somehow in our country, we are more concerned about political, strategic, and foreign policy issues when it comes to our neighborhood. In this age of globalized economy and interdependent world and interpenetration of markets, due attention needs to be given to economic scenario, to economic situation around our country, that is to say in our immediate, in the rest of the world, because everything impacts everything else. That's a very typical characteristic of globalized economy, that no country can really exist in isolation from the trends and the processes that are taking place in the rest of the world. And here it is our immediate neighborhood, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, which, as we all know, and as Ashok Bhai also brought out through statistical outline, both are facing severe economic crisis for the last 2 to 3 years. And we need to understand the background to this economic crisis that is impacting Pakistan and Sri Lanka both in a very critical way. As also we need to understand the likely implications of this economic crisis of Pakistan and Sri Lanka for the security, for the economy, for the foreign policy of India. So my purpose here is not so much to engage in an economically informed dialogue. And of course, I am not an economist, so I am liable to err as far as interpretations with respect to economic processes are concerned. But my larger purpose is to see how this scenario will influence India, Indian business, Indian economy down the years. Both countries are almost in a situation of debt trap. Almost debt trap because both are borrowing huge amounts of money, not so much to invest in welfare and infrastructure, not so much to invest in productive and employment generating economic activities, but rather to pay up the old debts. So you are taking a new loan to repay an old loan, and this cycle has created a crisis situation. As Ashok said, the GDP to debt ratio for both these countries has exceeded the level of comfort. It's not percentage. Fundamentally, as Ashok pointed out, Japan has 200% plus GDP to debt ratio. Problem with Pakistan and Sri Lanka is not so much the percentage of GDP to debt ratio, but rather the size of the economy and the capacity of the economy to meet the increasing debt that both these countries are incurring at this juncture. And it is possible that if they do not engage in radical macroeconomic transformation, if there is no major policy shift that they undertake in the coming years, this cycle of taking new debts to repay old debts would probably plunge both the countries and their economies in a situation of no return. We do hope that it doesn't happen. But there are countries which have faced this scenario of almost economic collapse, you see, almost a situation of economic collapse due to their inability to meet the challenges of the debt trap. Pakistan is a more severe case than Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is also a severe case, but more likely to overcome because of its inherent internal strengths. Pakistan faces so many internal challenges, and it has taken upon itself more goals than it can meet because of its own exaggerated self-image with respect to its role in South Asia, and also Pakistan's huge defense budget as compared to Sri Lanka. So Pakistan's continued need to meet the requirements of a belligerent armed force, Pakistan's severe need to continue to increase its defense budget so as to what it feels keep its parity with India, that is actually going to create more severe problem for Pakistan than or in comparison to Sri Lanka. So fundamentally what we have witnessed is a situation that has developed over a long period of time. Particularly in case of Pakistan, the IMF bailout which happened during the last 1 year through its extended lending facility of IMF, and that bailout procedure is still on. IMF it's assessing and then releasing the new installments of funding for Pakistan. This is the 13th bailout that Pakistan got from IMF since 1980s. It is a serial offender, if I may say so. India also faced similar situation in 1991. But thanks to Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh teams, farsightedness, and their ability to plan the transition from a crisis situation to a situation of macroeconomic stability. We did not fall back into the same situation after 1991. In fact, we are in such a comfortable situation now, as Ashok Bhai characterized, I mean, with nearly $650 billion of foreign reserves, in spite of the recession that took place during the last 2 years of COVID-induced economic slowdown, we are still in a very comfortable situation as far as our balance of payments and foreign reserves are concerned. Unlike Pakistan, which could not plan a proper strategy of macroeconomic management, in spite of facing such repeated balance of payment crisis situations. And unfortunately, in case of Pakistan, the economic base is very, very weak. Its exports are much lower than its imports. It has not been able to develop a sound manufacturing base so as to take care of its essential requirements through internal production. Even today, Pakistan imports a lot of its essential commodities, including food items, cotton, essential minerals, everything. So Pakistan's heavy reliance on imports, almost complete neglect of the imperative of economic self-sufficiency, at least in core sectors of economy, right after its independence. This has actually created a snowballing kind of an impact or an effect, whereby it is unable to come out of this spiraling effect of balance of payments crisis. It has to pay huge amounts in dollars even to keep the show going. And it has not been able to create the required infrastructure, required industrial base, required technological base, required knowledge base, so that its domestic industry is able to withstand the pressures of this external debt. Now here I must say that we should give due credit to the managers and the leaders of India's economy over the last many decades. And the kind of economic base that we have created, manufacturing base that we have created, has really stood India well. And the diversification of the economy is also another factor. Pakistan's economy is much less diversified as compared to India, and therefore it is not able to absorb the external economic shocks that result from situations like the COVID pandemic. On top of it, another factor has been it is a disproportionate allocation for defense. Now this is its political compulsion to maintain the balance between the civilian and the military segments of the power structure. And it is also a political compulsion because Pakistan's very existence requires a militaristic nationalism to be sustained through propaganda, through investments in new weapon systems, missiles, and so on. So an excessive or disproportionate allocation for defense has also caused this situation of very high, almost debt trap like situation for the country. It has led to double-digit inflation during the last 2 years. India's great achievement economically has been the control of inflationary pressure that we have been able to achieve. Despite COVID-related slowdown, our inflation today in this country is in single figure, 5%. Little, it just rose to 5% in the last data that was released, as compared to say a country of like Pakistan, where for some products it is as high as 25% or 30%. And more importantly, for food products, this inflation is very high. Now, this is due to this crisis created by external debt. It has very little resources really to offer for subsidies or to create new production of essential commodities. So production capacity is not rising, external debt is rising. And as Ashok Bhai pointed out, nearly 80-90% of the public revenue is used to just pay up the debt. Another factor needs to be mentioned with respect to Pakistan, and that is its beyond capacity commitments that it has taken up with respect to Afghanistan and support to Taliban forces. Not just since last August when Taliban officially took over, but everybody knows that even when United States supported government was ruling in Afghanistan, Taliban was largely financed by Pakistan's establishment through surreptitious means. So Pakistan uses a lot of its money to fund such secret missions in Afghanistan, in Jammu and Kashmir, and it costs a huge amount of money to fund terrorism. Terrorism is not a cheap activity. Now Pakistan has this fundamental ideological compulsion to divert its public resources to such secret strategic missions, whether in Jammu and Kashmir or in Afghanistan. And that also further exacerbates the economic situation. Another factor that I would like to mention is severe dearth of economic talent in Pakistan's ruling establishment. Macroeconomic management requires sound public policy making, sound database, and rational decision making. Unfortunately, the way Pakistan's ruling establishment has been structured so far, it has to give a short shrift to rational and sound macroeconomic decision making in preference to certain ideologically oriented decisions aimed at appeasing particular constituencies, particular vote banks within its own society. So all through the period since the rule of General Zia-ul Haq, we find that this whole project of Islamization of Pakistan's society has cost Pakistan not only in political and social terms. Yes, the political and social impact of this Islamization project is palpable. But what the current situation tells us is that such projects of radicalizing society on fundamentalist grounds also leads in the longer run to insurmountable and irreversible economic crisis. The logic of fundamentalism and economic rationality cannot coexist. And Pakistan needs to modernize its public policy making with respect to macroeconomic management. So there is indeed a very severe crisis that is developing in Pakistan, and it is no longer, if I may say so, a sovereign country in true sense of the term. It has, of course, taken to IMF as a last resort to bail itself out of this crisis, but very heavy debt exists with regard to China. This all-weather friendship between China and Pakistan has caused severe diminution of Pakistan's economic sovereignty. The China-Pakistan economic corridor, the construction of Gwadar port by China, leasing of large number of companies and natural resources of Pakistan to Chinese companies or to Chinese government agencies. Fundamentally, Pakistan's room for maneuver today is severely restricted because China is breathing down its neck, and it has forced Pakistani establishment to sign such restrictive agreements that for decades to come, Pakistan will not be able to assert itself against Chinese pressure. And the evidence of this was seen when Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Beijing this month. As we all understand, Pakistan is founded on the idea of not just Islamic nationalism, but Islamic brotherhood. And within Pakistan, there is a sizable constituency which feels that China is ill-treating, oppressing the Uyghur Muslims in its Xinjiang province. Imran Khan was forced to give a clean chit to Chinese government, saying that there is actually no harassment being done. There are no human rights violations as far as Uyghur Muslims are concerned. And all this is a product of Western media and Western propaganda. He was forced to say that because China is the only country which can, in the longer run, continue to pump in funds within Pakistan to support its balance of payment position. So, leasing of even gold mines to China. And there is a severe discontent that is created within Pakistan with respect to handing over critical assets of Pakistan to Chinese companies and Chinese government sponsored agencies. Same way with respect to Saudi Arabia. As we know, Saudi Arabia also is one of the major financiers of Pakistan, and it even last September gave nearly $3 billion worth of loan to Pakistan. But this is no longer the old Saudi Arabia. This is the Saudi Arabia which is also equally close to India now. In fact, if I may say so, today Saudi Arabia is probably closer to India in terms of its foreign policy orientation than to Pakistan. So even while extending this credit of $3 billion to Pakistan last September, Saudi Arabia has imposed such severe terms on Pakistan that Pakistan will not be able to get out of the dictates of Saudi regime in the coming years. Pakistan is also approaching UAE now, and again, UAE will impose its own terms. So the fundamental problem that Pakistan is facing and is likely to face increasingly in the coming years is a virtual sellout to some of these major global players, to United States through the agency of IMF, US and other capitalist countries, through China, to UAE, to Saudi Arabia. This might cause a flight of domestic capital out of Pakistan. You know, Pakistan has so much money stacked out of Pakistan. This is again a very typical feature of Pakistani society. Pakistan is poor in a nominal way, in a nominal sense. Lot of its money, whether the money made by the business persons or by politicians and military generals through corrupt practices, it is not recycled within the country. It is taken out. So this flight of capital out of Pakistan due to its corrupt regime and the corrupt civil military structure that it has created over the last few decades, that is also going to further increase. Those who afford, those who are powerful will take away their money out of the country, depriving the possibility of domestic production and domestic capital generation further. So I suspect that if this economic crisis persists, and as of now, there are no indications that Pakistan is engaging in a turnaround kind of a policy package. So IMF is pressing Pakistani regime to have a totally new type of policy package, but it will take time for it to really bring about such transformation of its macroeconomic policy. It might lead to a lot of domestic unrest within Pakistan. Pakistan has high rate of unemployment. Young people are not able to get jobs. People are not able to buy petrol or even essential food items. And Imran Khan's own prospects of re-election are severely constrained now. But who will replace him? That's a big question for India. Should India exploit this situation in Pakistan to its advantage? There are strategic experts who are arguing that, say, this is a godsend opportunity for us. Pakistan is our enemy. And let's try to fish in the troubled waters. Let us weaken Pakistan's economy further. It is already weakened because India, even limited trade that India and Pakistan had is suspended because of Article 370's abrogation and India's strong stand on terrorism. So even the limited legal trade that we had with Pakistan is now suspended. It's almost negligible. And even illegal trade routes are severely checked because of the vigilance of the Indian security agencies. Now, for us, the strategic choice that we will have to make is this: that should we fish in the troubled water and further weaken Pakistan indirectly, directly we don't have any control over Pakistani economy, but indirectly through Saudi Arabia, through United States, which will push Pakistan further into China's lap. This is going to be the inevitable consequence. Or we should try to just be neutral with respect to Pakistan's economic crisis. Another implication I see with respect to this economic crisis is that Pakistan will try to make money out of the smuggling in narcotics and drugs. You know, you must have been surprised by huge catches of drugs during the last few months. Many people argue that this is Pakistan's way of trying to make up for the economic crisis through illegally allowing the narcotics, the transnational narcotics network to supply drugs, not just in India, but all over the world. And Afghanistan, Pakistan, as we know, is one of the major producers and conduits of illegal drugs across the world. So this is again one major concern with respect to transnational crime that has developed due to Pakistan's severe economic crisis. That will this crisis lead to more narcotics related consignments being sponsored by Pakistan all over the world, and in turn causing more troubles socially and otherwise for the rest of the country. I think for Pakistan, this is a moment of reckoning. Its agricultural and industrial base needs to be revamped if it wants to come out of it. There are very few countries which have escaped political fallout of economic crisis. When your economy collapses, your politics and your society are bound to get impacted. And a Pakistani society and Pakistani politics in disarray is in fact a recipe for a lot of trouble for us. We don't want another Afghanistan-like situation to develop in Pakistan. If this thing worsens, is Pakistan going to slide into a Taliban-like regime taking over in the next some years or so? For Sri Lanka, we have an expert from Sri Lanka, but I would just say that the issue is the same. India has also extended a small bailout package to Sri Lanka just to counterbalance China. Particularly, the Sri Lankan regime itself has now understood the risks which are associated with China's debt trap diplomacies. This entire Belt and Road Initiative is nothing but another way of colonizing these countries which are borrowing money from China through very restrictive terms and conditions. But for Sri Lanka, I will just, and again, Ashok Bhai also say, its economic base is again very thin. See, tourism and agricultural products are the main sources of its GDP. I mean, the diversification has not taken place, and tourism almost came to a halt during the COVID period, depriving it of major source of its income. And as again Ashok Bhai mentioned, it's because fertilizer import again constitutes one major import item. Now it said that don't use external fertilizer. Now that reduced the tea production. So as a result of it, yes. So now I think I will come to an end with respect to my remarks here. There are quite a few other interesting observations that I think Ashok Bhai has to make, and also the expert that we have, Sri Arvind from Sri Lanka. So I look forward to their inputs on this enveloping critical situation in our neighborhood. And thank you once again, FGI, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you. Over to you, Ashok Bhai.
Thank you, Amit Bhai. That was a real fantastic presentation, and I got a lot of clarity on some of the points which I was not so clear on. So thank you for what you have done. To all of us, we really understand this better. May I take this moment here to invite Mr. Dulla to tell us his experiences and tell us how things are happening and going on in Sri Lanka. Mr. Dhula, please.
Thank you, Ashok Bhai. And thank you very much, Abhishek, for inviting me. Professor Dholakia, I'm under a little bit of pressure. I'm not no expert. It's just that I happen to do business in Sri Lanka, and so I might have some sort of ear to the ground, as they say. But I think both of you, Ashok Bhai and Amit Bhai, you have summarized the situation in both these countries beautifully. There is not much I can add except in Sri Lanka there is still scope for redemption. In my personal opinion, it's not yet gone the Pakistan way. But from an India perspective, as Amit Bhai, I think you have very, very rightly summed up. It's not an economic issue that we have to look out for. For India, it's a question of national security also, because in my personal opinion and the way I see Chinese operating in Sri Lanka, I think their major interest is India. Their more focus is to keep India at bay by having their presence in these two countries in different ways, whether they lend some money or they're taking advantage of political situation which is conducive to them. So Chinese are no benevolent lenders of money that they a small country like Sri Lanka with about the population of maybe Mumbai and its suburbs, that they are so interested. So India, I think, realizes that, and India also, as I see on the ground, is trying to get a foothold. People here still prefer, they find more affinity towards Indians. They feel Chinese are sort of colonizing, have a colonizing mentality. But Indians have a cultural connect, a historical connect. So I think in the context of this forum, the FGI, I think one of the best ways to, other than the government in Sri Lanka at every instance, I think if Indian businesses come here, and there are a lot of, in this adversity, we see a lot of opportunities, because one of the things that has come out after this economic crisis for Sri Lankans is to be more self-sufficient. They had taken the easy way out of importing everything, and now they realize that with the pressure that they are facing on dollars and the money, that they want to be self-sufficient. There's a lot of emphasis on producing pharmaceuticals locally and other industries also. And the other thing is that, as Ashok Bhai was showing some of those slides from my friends in the central bank and in the ministries of finance, their debt is nearly 120% actually, including the domestic debt and everything, 120% of GDP. And they have actually been hit by two things, Sri Lanka, if you ask me, if I have to summarize. One is that post-war, the Mahinda Rajapaksa government, there was a different kind of euphoria, and they invested in some vanity projects, projects which wouldn't really bring any income or add anything beneficial to the economy. That was one mistake that the main Chinese sort of indulged them. The port, as you know, Hambantota, which again Chinese have literally occupied it. And there are a few more such vanity projects that they did. That was one thing where this sort of decline started, where people were worried even then that they are putting money into things that are not going to give them any economic benefit. And as all of you explained, as both of you explained, this COVID impacted them in terms of dollars, because it's not only tourism, it's also remittances that Sri Lanka gets from abroad. A lot of Sri Lankans go abroad in the service industry in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, where they send back dollars. Typically, tourism and remittances contribute anywhere between 6 to 7 billion of dollar inflows for Sri Lanka, which fell down to just close to $1 billion last year. I think that was something which I think if I have to speak in favor of my friends in Sri Lanka, something that nobody could have anticipated, and that sort of put them in a huge conundrum. And as most of you would agree, economics is always political. So they have been deferring going to IMF for the last year for political reasons, but there is no way out for them other than going to IMF. They have been printing a lot of currency, which is causing even more problems. There is too much money chasing too little goods which are anyway imported, and it's there are going to be inflationary effects which already are visible. People are facing hardship here, and also government is trying to regulate the dollar. So Ashok Bhai pointed out it's at 202. Yes, it's 202 as per the central bank's dicta. It's not market determined. In the black market, the dollar is selling at 255, and they expect it to hit 300 by the end of the year. So there are a few political decisions that the Sri Lankan government has to take, and considering it's a small country, and people are generally efficient, and that they have a sense of pride. I think Sri Lanka is a redeemable case, but India has to watch out. We as people of the industry, we have to invest more. We have to find ways of taking advantage of this adverse situation where at the moment they're giving a lot of SOPs, welcoming people who are willing to invest and set up industry here. So this is a good opportunity, if I may say so, in this forum, that if people are interested, they must explore. The government of India is also, the High Commission here is encouraging Indians to come and invest. So these are a few points. And yes, Ashok Bhai, it's 2.69 square kilometers, about 270 hectares of land in the port city. But port city also is it's a 2040 project, because it's not going to happen in one go. So we have to wait and watch whether it's going to be Chinese who are going to make a mini Macau here or try to make a small Hong Kong. But that remains to be seen. It's a pure private project of the Chinese, so with very little input from the Sri Lankan side. But yes, if people invest in the financial city and the plans that they have, I'm sure it's going to benefit the local economy. If anybody has a specific question on Sri Lanka, I'll be happy to answer. But these are my 2 cents after the 2 eminent speakers had sort of covered most of what needed to be covered on these 2 countries, I suppose.
I just have a very small question. First of all, thank you, Mr. Arvind Dulu. Thank you, Ashok Bhai and Professor Dholakia. It has been really insightful. Mr. Dulu, I just have one very small question. For those, all our members out here and all the participants, I might just, gladly add that Mr. Arvind Dulu belongs to Baroda. His parents are in Baroda, so he has a very good connect with FGI and all of us. I just have one small question: that how easy is it to put up shop in Sri Lanka, especially for Indians? How easy is it to deal with the Sri Lankan bureaucracy, or is everything going to be rooted by the first family, the political family? Okay, we cannot do much business with Pakistan because of the political embargo, but how easy is it to do business in Sri Lanka?
Abhishek, number one, like I mentioned in my small, update for all of you, that Indians are welcome by and large. If you go by statistically, I think 70-80% of this population is pro-India, despite what we do in the north and elsewhere, because they find we all of us are rice eaters, so there's a common connect there. Doing business, it's not as complicated as one would imagine. Not being here, they have, for foreign investments, there is a organization called BOI, a Board of Investment. I think that's a pretty well empowered organization. It's like a one-stop shop for any investment that comes into Sri Lanka, and it also depends on what kind of industry. Of course, there is, in this part of the world, in South Asia, there's always political influence. But if you, the question that you sort of were blunt enough to ask, that does everything have to be rooted through a certain section of the political class? I would say not necessarily. I think the BOI is quite a facilitative organization. It's more of a single window kind of body. And also, not to forget, the High Commission is very, very proactive. I think in the last 8-9 years, I've observed that the High Commission also proactively promotes, if you're coming and if you get stuck, even they come in. So I wouldn't say it's ease of doing business, medium, not too bad, not too easy, but FDI is welcome at this moment. If you set up something that is of, say, pharmaceutical industry, at the moment, there's a lot of encouragement for pharmaceuticals. They are running. If you come, they'll welcome you with kid gloves. It's like that. So anything that helps them sustain, helps them reduce their imports, it helps. I'll just add one more point on, I'm sorry if I'm taking too much of your time. On the fertilizer part, the question was not of reducing the import. The issue started with chemical fertilizers. There is a big issue in this country of kidney disease. There's a whole section of population which is sick with renal failures. And one of the reasons is that they attribute it to consistent use of chemical fertilizers. So Gotabaya Rajapaksa came in his manifesto for his presidentship, said he's going to convert everything to organic, which is good. The foolishness was that he said stop chemicals, start organic. It doesn't work that way. So they were importing organic fertilizers anyway. It wasn't that the organic was available locally. So it didn't really help them avoid import. It was more to start and perpetuate organic farming. But then they didn't have enough organic manure. So it has they were not able to supply enough organic fertilizer in time. Then nano urea had to be rushed from India. And also typically in organic farming, from what I understand, is that the first crop, whenever you do, always the yield goes down. So their yields have gone down drastically. It's a phenomenon apparently when you use organic. It takes 1 or 2 crop cycles for it to come back to its original levels. So that has been a little, that's been plain stupid, if I may be blunt. It was he's an ex-army man, so he thought he will ram it down everybody's throat. But it's not helped on the organic part. So
Great, Arvind bhai. Thank you very much. We hope to see you when you come to Baroda next. And maybe have more conversation on how things are there. So we hope to see you when you're here. Yeah. I think I'm ready to head into the question answer session. Just 2 minutes, because I have some interesting tidbits on the Pakistan military industrial complex.
Just my pleasure. It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, Arvind bhai, good. I'll connect up with you. Okay.
Sure.
Yes.
My pleasure.
Okay, let me talk a little bit about the military in Pakistan. Out of the 75 years, 30 years they were directly running the country. They were ruling the country, meaning they had the parliament. They were the parliament. Out of 30 years. I didn't catch that statistics earlier. There's one sentence which says out there, which says that a country, a normal country, there's a country, and then there is the parliament, or there's the government, and the people, the government, and the parliament, the military serves them. So the country has a military. What I've heard about Pakistan, and the sentence goes that here you have a military which has the country, if you can catch that. So the country is owned by the military and not vice versa, which is there in most other places. Let's see. There's another very interesting sentence by let's see. In Pakistan, there are some 12 trusts which are owned by the military, and these trusts, they're responsible for, on the production side, they're responsible for a very large, significant percentage of the GDP, meaning it's a business empire, and this business empire runs insurance companies, they run the gas industry, they run fertilizer industries, they run the fish farms. So it's the military who owns the business through these trusts. Shocking. And that's how they get that military power as well as the economic power in the economy itself. Then there's a plethora of consultants who consult for these trust companies. So the way the fund flows is the people's funds from the treasury goes into somehow or the other is routed to these consultants, and therefore there is the people who are connected with the military, they're all making money, and that's how the whole upper class of Pakistan is operating. I think that's one of the emphasis which I wanted to make. The military owns the country, and you imagine now. So, what is the status of the political parties? What is the status of the parliament? What is, if Pakistan is to go to IMF, who are they sending? IMF also knows that they're dealing with a military regime, and they're not very keen to support. But then it's a nuclear power. It's like a North Korea having next door to us. So this is very complex, and I think it's going to get more complex as we go along. And we'll have to see it. We'll have to face it, as our doctor has mentioned. So with that, can I take this opportunity now to go ahead and open up to questions? Please share your questions with us now.
Can I?
Please come. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, Ashok, please.
Yes, sir. This side Kalpesh Agrawal. We are one animal feed manufacturing company, animal feed machine manufacturing company in Halol. Actually, we have one customer in Sri Lanka, from whom we have finalized an order of around $8 lakh in the last year. But due to this crisis, they are not able to send us the money, and this order is on hold. Now their chairman wants us as an Indian to help them out in a way that we can. So is there any business opportunity? Is there any way that we can help out to the Sri Lankan company in this manner? Is there any way?
Can I take that, Abhishek?
Sorry?
Of course, Arvind, you can go ahead.
Yeah, please.
So, this is Arvind. I was in from Lanka. One of the things you can do is you can open Bank of India.
Okay.
Yeah, you can approach the Exim Bank of India. They have lot of schemes for exporters, where they have these deferred payment schemes where they can help you. So
okay,
you can connect with the Exim Bank of India.
Okay.
They might be able to give you some solution, because I can understand your customer is not good to this because they don't have dollars to pay you at the moment. They can't open an LC for you.
Exactly, that's the thing. That's the thing. They are not have they don't have sufficient dollars to repay us.
But try talking to the Exim Bank of India. Yes, they.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't have. So, but Exim Bank of India can, they have these buyers credit, lenders credit arrangements where they'll give you a seller's credit. You can check. Maybe if the local guy is giving you a 200-day LC or a 240-day LC, then Exim Bank can discount it for you. So you will have to contact the Exim Bank, and they will help you with your exports to Sri Lanka.
Okay, sure, sir. We'll do that. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Yes, Shravan. Please unmute.
Am I audible to you? Yeah. Thank you very much. In case of small currencies like $10,000 or $30,000 or below $1 lakh.
We are unable to hear you, Mr. Gupta.
Now, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. In case of small orders, like below $50,000, not big amount, like $20,000, $30,000, small orders, will Exim Bank entertain those small values if you want to export Sri Lanka for some chemicals? Like we are from mineral industries. So our cargo value is around $10,000 to $30,000 something, regular, cargo. So in this case, if Sri Lankan importers want to buy and they are unable to pay because of the current, situation, dollar scarcity in banks. So will Exim Bank support for small dollars also, like small value also? Is there any way out?
You will have to check that. I'm not sure. I haven't done any specific study on this, but you can visit their website. Most of the details are on the website, and you can check that. I'm not sure up to what is the minimum value that they would support.
Okay. Okay, one last question I have. One last question. May I ask?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. In case we exported, Sri Lanka some minerals 2-3 months back, and customer is ready to pay. They have funds with them, but their bank is unable to pay us. So in that situation, how shall we deal with? How shall we deal in such situations? Customer has funds, they want to pay, but due to the dollar scarcity, uh, our money is, our realization is stuck up in Sri Lanka. So in that situation, what should be our strategy to take the money back? They want to help us, but due to this dollar shortage, they are unable to help. So what should be our strategy or approach to gain money or to take back money?
Well, I don't know if I'm not the expert on this, but it's a tough question that you're asking. But I can only inform you that since I also deal with the local banks, the only thing you can do is you can decide the LC term. You'll have to give them a longer LC terms. I understand that between 180 days to 200 days LCs are being honored. But it depends on the product also. It depends on the importance of the product for the country. I think it's all being done that way. But if you ask me as a person involved in some work here, my feedback to you is that the banks are opening 180-day to 200 days LC. So that might be you can accept that term perhaps if your buyer is willing to do that. The truth is that there is a dollar shortage and it's being given out only for emergency important products that that are contributing to their economy. For those, they are willing to take and move an extra mile. But if it's say a luxury product, something which is not really important, then it's all put on the back burner in the priority.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question for Professor Dholakia, but it's a slightly different kind of a question.
Yes.
If you can tell me, okay, China is closing up to Pakistan. Obviously, they want to be close to India, and all the India, China, Pakistan, whatever the geopolitical issues. But is Pakistan sitting on any major natural resources, just like China were in Africa? Do they see anything out there?
Some minerals, and particularly there are gold mines in Balochistan, which China is eyeing. More importantly, it's not natural resources. It is rather the control over the ports, control over the infrastructure, railways, everything. It helps China expand its reach to the Middle East, even to Iran via Pakistan, because Iran and Pakistan are also now coming closer. Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China. That kind of axis is emerging. So more importantly, for China, it is not really an investment from a commercial perspective. It is investing in its long-term strategic growth as a superpower. and it has a lot of spare money really to invest. But it is not it's not giving this money unconditional. So that's the problem. There are severe conditionalities attached, and Pakistan is today not really sovereign. It's half mortgage to China. It
So,
might be an exaggeration, but it is half mortgage to China in many ways.
So I just have a very direct question. When you weigh geopolitics and geoeconomics, right? Ashok Bhai's favorite topics. When you actually weigh geopolitics and geoeconomics, would you rather see a very economically strong Pakistan or an economically weak Pakistan is good for India?
For India, economically strong Pakistan is good.
And why may I ask you
Because
why?
otherwise it will lead into some kind of Afghan-like situation, which will be very, very difficult to manage. And it's a nuclear power, you see. A nuclear power with a collapsing economy and rising fundamentalism. It's a recipe not just for disaster for India only, but rest of the world. Pakistan's biggest problem is that, I should not say that, but it is like, I mean, it has allowed itself to be used by external. You just give money to Pakistan and they can do anything. So that kind of approach, all regimes have exhibited. अमेरिका पैसा देता है तो आपका काम कर लेंगे, चाइना देता है तो आपका काम कर लेंगे, and it has always sacrificed its sovereignty. So this approach, transactional approach, that you give us money and we will do your bidding, that has actually caused this whole thing. And for us, India really had visionary leadership, which prevented us from going on that path. The key difference.
Abhishek, just imagine we having a rogue state next door, and imagine one day Pakistan becomes an Afghanistan, imagine what would happen to our Rajasthan and that whole border. It's trouble. So an economic, powerful Pakistan is so much better than anything else, One other interesting tidbit there is, which I had noted here and wanted to share. Pakistan International Airlines is referred to as Bajwa Airlines, as it is ran by the family members of the present Chief General of the Army, Javed Bajwa. Its president and former CEO is the former Vice Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Ashok Malik, being the brother of the brother-in-law of General Bajwa. Okay, so this is how they got Pakistan Airlines right under the military arm, and that's what we're saying. The military is running the whole economic show nearly. One very other interesting thing, which I think some of our young people would not know. In India, when we gained independence, we had this old zamindar system. We had the Rai Bahadurs who had 5,000 acres of land, and it was cultivated, and there was one rich guy and people were working for him. India, through the parliament, abolished the zamindar system, and all the land slowly got distributed to the people. It went to, and it created the middle class out of that. Over a period of 50 years. This journey started in 1950. In Pakistan, nothing of that sort happened as far as the zamindari system in Pakistan continues. So you've got the military on one side, you've got the rich old landlords who have huge tracts of land, and between them, there's no room for the people and the middle class. And that's why you get this, you're getting terrorism and jihadis on the ground, So this is their story. How this is going to improve for our betterment, I don't know. I don't know. I think things are just going to get worse, because things have to get worse before they get better, if they do. And that's where it's headed. So with that, I think if we don't have any more questions.
I think we have one question from Mr. Sharma.
Okay. Gopal, please.
Sir, actually, we export multiple products to Africa continent. So in multiple FMCG product and even in rice, especially in basmati rice, Pakistan is good competitor for us. So my question is that what and how challenges we can face in coming time as far as Pakistan as a competitor.
the rice. Amit bhai?
Sorry, I didn't
Rice.
actually get the question, exact question.
My question is like what and how Pakistan can impact us, or what the challenges we can face in coming time as far as their competitors in FMCG products and rice.
In agriculture.
Well, I think the inequality in terms of size and the base between Indian economy and Pakistani economy is so huge that I don't really see them as competitors. Pakistan economy is not even of the size of Gujarat's economy. It's even smaller than Gujarat's economy. So it's such an uneven kind of a scenario that we are really not competing with Pakistan, or Pakistan is really not. Maybe in some specific products it's okay. Maybe in some specific products where they have an advantage, yes, the Indian manufacturers might see some kind of competition. But in terms of macro picture, I think economically we are, I mean, they are no match to us in any way. Its economy is even 1/3 the size of Tamil Nadu's economy. Though its population is much bigger than Tamil Nadu's population, or even nearly 4 times the population of Gujarat, but its economy is smaller than Gujarat's economy in terms of GDP. So such is the unevenness in terms of our power, economic power and strength.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amit bhai. I think that concludes our program today. May I request Premal bhai to maybe give you a short vote of thanks?
May I request President, he is present, he would like to put up a word of thanks to everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for this enlightened discussion. Thank you, Professor Dholakia. Thank you, Ashok bhai. Thank you, Arvind Dolu, straight from Sri Lanka. We always think of our neighbors that we need to be better than them. That is what, if they are equal, and if as a region we have to see that at least our region has to be strong, and other bigger countries or other countries who have different ambitions cannot take advantage of our regional hostilities. So economically, we have to be strong. Unfortunately, some of our political leaders do not think about it. There are populist measures, but a robust economy in all neighboring countries is good. You see what Europe is, or what Europe, how it came up, because smaller countries, but they all got together, probably made the European Union. That is something that was pretty good. So I would just like to thank again to all our speakers, to all the past participants. We have started this particular geopolitical and geoeconomic discussion that FGI and Ashok bhai is heading our geopolitical committee. We hope to have more meaningful discussions, and we hope that you all will be attending, taking more active interest. Hopefully, if the COVID situation is better, we can have it in person, because there's nothing like being in person and having a discussion over a cup of actual coffee. So thank you everyone again for attending today. Thank you, Arvind, Professor Dholakia and Ashok bhai again. Thank you, Premal. And everybody have a very good weekend and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.